All right, so we are officially recording. So once again, the official welcome. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's discussion. Now, this is actually my first official discussion for the new semester or workshop. I like to go in between workshop and discussion because, of course, there's a lot of just insight shared, and of course, with work to do. Depending on the resonance of the information shared here. And today we are talking about the emotional scale, but from a different perspective. There are two different types of scales that I wanted to show and compare. And of course, when we did workshops in the past about emotions and chakras and things like that, we looked at a very specific emotional scale, and I'll bring that up in a moment. And we became very familiar with that scale of emotions as we talked about emotions. But there was another scale that I actually resonated with, and I was able to go a little bit deeper with my emotional work and with my personal, again, constant revelations with self, even emotionally, and just having a great skill to kind of gauge yourself through your emotions and not necessarily demonizing one particular part of self over the other, which is something that can really happen when you are looking at your chakras and looking at where some of these emotions may live. So we're going to talk a lot about balance today. Of course, we are focused on rising and harmonizing. That is the theme for this entire remainder of the year. So we have our mentors hosting workshops dedicated towards, rising and harmonizing, and I'll be hosting the workshops as well. So this is definitely a part of that, rising and harmonizing. And what does that really mean? How can we really maintain that balance without getting bored? Because that's the whole point of rising and harmonizing, is balancing, learning that balance, making sure that you are really navigating through your life in a way that you are coming from a standpoint of being centered and projecting your actual reality. We talked a lot about the subconscious mind in the last semester, which we're definitely going to come into this semester with a lot more subconscious talk, because we have to include the subconscious when we're talking about realities and how we perceive realities. But first, of course, it's easy to start out with just gauging out our realities with going more so into the language of resonance and paying attention to your emotions. So I'm going to pull up the very first scale that we are all used to seeing. And we're going to go over that really quickly, again, in comparison to, I would say, a much more expansive view of just the emotional scale and how we can kind of get through. Now, of course, we always love to ask questions first just to see where people are. We've talked about emotions and chakras a lot, all right? For those of you who have already been here. And again, the theme for July specifically is the root and crown chakra. Now, if you did not get a chance to check out Ujo's workshop, I believe it was Sunday or Monday. Either way, it's in the units section as well in the course section. But she did a workshop. She did the very first workshop on rising and harmonizing with the crown and the root. And just to go over before we even get to the charts, let's go through the reasoning as to why we're sandwiching the chakras the way that we are. Now, for the new members, we have the 7-day workshop available for you guys. I'm going to share the link to that because I believe it's not posted at the bonus workshops or under the bonus workshops for you guys. So I'm going to post a link for that. But I highly recommend that you go through that particular workshop first and get your 7 days of self in, of walking through yourself. Okay, it's like a self walkthrough just to get to know the neighborhoods or the worlds within you so that you can get a feel of the resonance, because a lot of this work that we do for the remainder of this year is resonance. It's based on knowing exactly what is what, who is who, when is when, you know, being there for timing and all of that with self. Everything becomes a lot more synchronistic when you just know what languages you're speaking, because the different parts of ourselves speak different languages. So if you understand the language of your sacral, and knowing the difference between your sacral speaking through you versus your heart speaking, or versus your mind expressing, it's easy to gauge out these languages when you clear yourself through that inner walkthrough. So it's the 7 days, but it's 9 gates. Okay, it's 9 gates to get through to become, at least based upon my workshop, self-sustained. So the whole point of all of this is to rise within yourself, ascend within yourself to the point where you know you're inside and you're familiar with all of that resonance, and then taking all of that energy, right, that you've collected, and releasing the energies at the same time, to the point where when you get to your crown chakra, you are able to go right back inside with all of this energy and again fuel yourself, because the whole point of this is to remain self-sustained. Okay, we don't want to walk around in this reality being parasitic. All right, there's no need to be parasitic. We don't need to leech off of other people's energies or anything like that. We have that ability to be self-sustained, so that we are sharing and receiving from each other and not feeding off of each other. And that's one of the most important things to at least get to when going through or dealing with this work, because a lot of the chakras, believe it or not, based on past experiences, could be programmed for you to feel like you need to engage with something externally in order for it to feel fulfilled. And that depends on which chakra we're talking about, what kind of experiences you had, especially in childhood, and so on. So these are just different chakras that you can kind of readjust as you walk through, to keep them, or to remind these inner energy centers that, hey, you are self-sustained, you have everything you need, you just need a little adjustment here. So definitely do that workshop first as we go through our rising and harmonizing. So with the rising and harmonizing, we're basically now, as I would mention in the last workshop that some of you are going to get through, we're doing the parallel comparison, or the parallel syncing of the chakras to meet each other in the heart space, so that you can meet yourself in your heart. So we are starting off with the crown and the root together, because they're parallel to each other. The root and the crown are basically connecting. One is connecting to the higher aspects of self, also connected to higher realms and realities. And the lower, or the root, is connected, of course, to the lower bases, is connected to everything lower. Okay, so they do the same things, but they're just in quote unquote opposition, but they're doing, again, the same thing. They're connecting to higher and lower realms that are beyond. Now, when we're moving on from the crown and the root, we're going into third eye and sacral. Now, third eye and sacral will be working together, because they actually kind of do the same thing. They're creative spaces from within. So from one point, we are able to envision and project and imagine. And from the sacral, we're actually able to generate that creative energy there, and also manifest reality from a different point of view. So one is from sight and one is from resonance and emotion. So they do sort of the same thing. So we're working with those chakras together. And as we go down, we're going into throat and solar plexus. So expression and ego. Do you have a healthy expression of your ego? They work hand in hand. A lot of the time we can adjust to where, from where we're really expressing ourselves from the most. And we're going to talk a lot about that as we go along in this workshop, this long-term workshop here. But the throat and the solar plexus, how do you feel about yourself? How confident do you feel within yourself to express? So how does your throat and solar actually work together harmoniously? And then, of course, we're going to end up in our hearts. Okay, so in our heart spaces, we're all meeting each other or meeting yourselves really in the middle. And from this point, when we finally get to that center, which is basically we're doing this on a month-to-month basis, so that I believe the center month is October. So when we get to October, we're going to end up here. And from here, the travel begins, the travel of self, the interdimensional travel, because you've been able to really harmonize, like tuning an instrument, right? Harmonize yourself into your heart to the point where now you are in the clear for actual interdimensional travel. And once you get there, that is another version of ascension. Okay, so ascension, we're talking about going high from, let's say, the Kundalini awakening, from the root or from the base to the top. And there's an awakening in that, but there's another version of an awakening that meets you in the middle. And when you meet yourself there, there's another doorway to self that is a bit more or a lot more expansive, that gives you an all-encompassing feeling of growth, and just even more layers to get through yourself from the heart space. I love to say that the heart is boundless. So in a space that is boundless, it is beyond to just explore in that space. Why not? And as we go into December, we're going to get more so into our inner Christos, okay, our inner Christ. And around Christmas time, we're actually going to rediscover, for some of you, or maybe newly discover, the Christ itself within. All right, not from a religious standpoint, from that inner, true, crystal, Christ itself, that has fully activated. And that is the goal for this whole thing, going more so into 2021, because if some of you guys saw my post, 2021, and I believe Ujo, she brought attention to this as well in a private chat, to where this 2021 and 2012 are similar frequencies. So we're going more so into the beginning and the end, right? Because we all know what everyone claims was supposedly to happen in 2012, and we are coming back into that frequency. And it's interesting that everything is happening in the world the way that it is, even more so intensely than that 2011 going into that 2012. Okay, we didn't have all of this stuff going on in 2011. Meanwhile, people were just like, oh my God, 2012 is coming. The end of the world is coming. What's going to happen, right? So now we're in 2020, which is kind of like a 2011 frequency if you're paralleling it, right? And we're like, people are kind of just like, oh my God, 2021, 2012, what's going to happen? So is the 2021 really the 2012? Did we get some sort of grace period, right? Some sort of 8-year grace period to kind of get through to get to the real 2012 frequency of whatever that is and what the Mayans were talking about? Who knows? We can explore that, right? But either way, when you really understand resonance, then you'll get more clarity on what the feels are, and through inner sight as well. With resonance and sight, you can become more clearer on your path to see where your path is taking you. As we get further into our discussions as well this month, we're going to go back into timeline discussion as well, to match up these frequencies that we are working with our inner resonance. We're going to talk about timelines and different types of travel as you are working with your resonance, because when we're talking about traveling into different spaces, it's really based on your level of frequency. So it won't feel like you're traveling physically, but consciously you're moving in and out of different doorways and paths that are completely different from each other. But, there are like variations, right? So it's almost as if you wanted to, let's just say you wanted to operate on the path of the dominant, and we're going to get into the chart in a second, but your dominant path being the dominant path of your heart space. You love allowing your heart to lead, right? And be the guide for the rest of your space. So if you are a leader or allowing your heart to lead, let's just call that the H train, right? If we're going on a train, or a plane or whatever traveling vehicle, there's always a path, right? So even when you go in an airplane, there's a path that the plane takes. When you get on a train on tracks, there's a specific track that the train takes, right? So if you are on a specific train, right? And it's, let's say I'm from New York, it's the A train, right? You're getting on the A train because there's a specific stop that you need to get off to. And that F train or that L train or those other trains are not able to take you to where you need to go. So you need to get on that particular train, right? So you knowing that you need to get on that train, you go to a very specific station and a very specific track. So when you're operating within resonance within yourself and timelines and reality and experiencing realities, you have to know which station to go to within yourself. If I want to travel through my heart's lens, let's say, because for me, and we're going to talk about the different ways on how we all resonate because everyone's not the same. But let's just say I feel that the heart is all encompassing. The heart is like a rainbow. It holds all of the colors and resonances of all of the chakras, right? So since if that's the case and that's the path of the heart that you want to take, then when you resonate from the heart deeply, it brings you to the heart train or the heart plane or, you know, whatever it is, whatever vehicle this is for you. And that path will lead you to exactly where your heart desires, right? And again, we can switch tracks. We can do whatever we want, but this is just an example. And then we have a whole other offline aspect of travel. And this is where we talk about kind of like really gaining in. And as we get closer to interdimensional travel towards the end of the year, we're talking about really resonating within your own universe. All right. So now it's no longer really having to wait for a train or wait to hop over or do anything, because now you're in a dominant resonance on purpose. And now you are able to truly project your reality through through knowing your own inner universe. And traveling through your own inner universe in a way to where you don't really need a vehicle for that. It's just your consciousness and your adjustments. We can call that wings. Let's just say, hey, you got your wings. So there's no need to really travel on the vehicles anymore in that way. So there's like this adjustment to self. Once you really get to know yourself, your wings come out. And when your wings come out, that's when more travel, you know, if that's in a symbolic way of saying I'm free of any depending on specific vehicles in order to travel. You know, if I want to fly, I just pull out my wings and fly, right? You know, I don't have to catch the flight, you know. So there's a difference even in frequency and when we're talking about interdimensional travel in that way. So we work our way towards that space. So we are respecting the process on that. Right? We are respecting the process. So let me look in the comments and see if there's anything that you guys are saying or asking. Before I get started with the charts, did anyone have any specific questions about anything before we get started? Hey, Buddha. Hello, Angelica. Bonjour, Andrielle. Okay, so I see there are no particular questions or comments. So we're going to get started with the very first scale. So let me just pull this up really quickly. Give me a moment here. All right, let me get this on the screen. Okay, so here we have the first emotional scale, the emotional scale that most of us are used to seeing, right, and experiencing. So we have here the Omega scale, it is called here, the Alpha and Omega perspective. So when we're looking at the scale, we're looking at, and if you are paying attention to the colors, you can also see that the colors are also resonating with very specific chakras. And I'll tell you again, or share the differences with this and why kind of misunderstanding this whole thing can get you, can knock you out of balance with yourself if you're not aware of certain things. So we have this scale here. As you can see, these numbers here represent the vibratory frequency rate of this specific emotion. So it's like measuring the emotion itself. So when we say vibrate high or high frequency, we're talking about the high number resonance, to quantify that resonance. And of course, low vibrational feelings and emotions are on the lower end. So here at the very bottom, we have shame, which is basically the lowest of the lowest that you can go within your emotional scale. If you kind of go beyond shame, if you go lower than that, you're kind of like nowhere. It's kind of like you're just walking dead. And we're going to talk about that in a second. So we have shame here. We have guilt. All right. So we're working our way up the scale. Guilt and shame. Apathy, meaning not really caring about anything. Grief, which is more so sadness or mourning or feeling loss or lack. We have fear as we get to 100. And you can see again, when it's aligned with the color, you can see what chakras dominantly hold these emotions. That's why looking at the scale is actually really good, but it's not all encompassing, which is again why we're going to go to the second scale, to the invisible weight scale, as I like to call it. But as you can see, let's just say guilt and shame, apathy and grief. From about 20 to 75, you see that most of those emotions can live in your root, right? Your security, your sacral, your creativity, your reproductive, your sexual area, and apathy and all of that living more so in the solar plexus and still in the sacral kind of area. Then when we get to fear, all right, we're getting more so into the yellow. Fear falls or can live more so in the solar plexus, right? It resonates there. When we go up, now we're getting more so into desire. So from fear to desire, we're getting closer to the heart chakra with desire, but we're still in solar plexus. Then desire can very easily turn into anger, right? So we're moving up, we're getting into the anger, we're right below the heart with that, still kind of sort of in solar plexus territory. And then we get into pride, which is kind of blended in with the heart and solar. And then we get more so into courage, the courageous heart, which is basically going right into the green. Neutrality will be more so the center, which would be kind of like upper heart. All right. There's an upper and lower heart as well. So we're getting more so into neutrality. And then we're going up to willingness. So willingness to accept self, because when you've gone through these spaces within your heart, there's more so than unconditional love. So when you are unconditionally loving yourself, you are being reconditioned by your heart. It's kind of like going through a wash of self. When you walk through your heart and allow yourself to restore in that place, or that space within you, it's like you're being washed, washed, not brainwashed or heart washed, but restored and recharged. So now you come more so into willingness and acceptance, which brings you, the heart is indeed a bridge. So now the bridge has brought you now into your higher lands of self. So now we're coming into acceptance and reason. So now we're starting to utilize the mind and the consciousness, and you can see the emotions down below don't really necessarily have anything to really do with higher levels of consciousness. So you start to actually reason around 400, which is more so third eye, indigo right here. And then when you start reasoning, and once you've been kind of like, reconditioned and washed and cleansed, I should say, not even washed, cleansed by the heart, going into your space of acceptance and love, you start loving yourself truly, and you start feeling that resonance of love from a higher point of view. So you get here, going more so into upper third eye, crown, And then in the crown, when we're ready to travel beyond, right, beyond, we start going into joy, moving more so into joy, peace, enlightenment, right? So we start getting at the top of the crown here. And this is where, when you are truly resonating within this space, this is where you are able to go beyond the stars or soul star chakra that is above this crown here. And it is like interdimensional travel to the higher spaces and the higher aspects of self. But as you can see, there's a trip and there's a journey here. So this looks like ascension, right? What most people would consider to be ascension, starting from the bottom, going to the top of self. But the thing is, right, and it's interesting that because in this chart they have expanded at the top and contracted at the bottom. Here's the thing with that, is you can even see this as being a cone here with no other side to balance it. This looks like this, if this stops spinning, or if this was like a body of some sort, it looks like this here would look like a very fragile root, right? Compared to a very heavy or expanded consciousness. This is why I personally do not necessarily resonate with this particular emotional chart when describing my specific emotional ascension process. Because as Ujo presented in her workshop, she talks about descension as well, which is very important to recognize, because when you go up, you gain the ability, and you've collected all of the keys within yourself to now travel wherever, right? But sometimes we travel right back down. And what this looks like here is, looking at this chart, what it looks like is it's easy to fall, right? This looks like a fallen chart, or a fallen, you get up here, you feel all the pressure to stay up here in this way, because you look down there and you're saying, oh, wait a second, I am not going down there, so therefore I'm going to stay here, which kind of knocks you out of balance when you see it from this perspective, because there's a subconscious prejudice, right, which can be misinterpreted here if you're looking at all of these in this way of, this kind of reminds me even of credit scores, the whole credit system. You have a 700 plus credit, you're good, right? But then even with that, sometimes your credit can be too high. So it's just like, it's the same thing. You're going to scale through all of these emotions. So you might as well learn balance with all of these aspects of self, not even with these emotions necessarily, because we're going to get into that with the second chart that I show you. But looking at this color scale and this map of self, this is more so, it's not about making this lower land smaller, if not necessary, right? So now we're going to get more so into the second part of the chart to bring more balance and harmony into how we really can, or how we can really truly adjust our emotions and really navigate through self without holding prejudice. Because it's very easy. And I even found myself doing that even on my own ascension journey, where once you get to a certain point of self at a high point, you kind of look down and you're just like, ooh, I ain't never going back there. And it's just like, but there are gifts and jewels that are there. They just need some guidance and some adjustments. So there's a travel back into that part of self, unless you abandon that part of yourself. And when you do, there's trouble and the balance becomes distorted, and the balance is balanced no more. So when you start getting into that, then if you're living in the higher realms without accounting for your lower realms of self, then this is where high sensitivity, hypersensitivity and anxiety comes in, because now you're only living in your mind. Now you're only living in your head. All of this energy is rising to the top. It's staying there. And now it's over analyzing without bringing in some of the lower energies to balance those energies out. So let me just bring up the second chart now for you guys, so that we can again make the comparison between the two perspectives. Let me look at the comments for a moment. Wentana, my name means desire. Kind of makes me want to change my name very low energetically. Wentana, wait until we get to the second scale. All right, because there's nothing wrong with desire. This is why I say again, when we're looking at these numbers, it's causing this subconscious prejudice, saying, well, I would rather this over this. Now, desire is something that we need. This being housed in the solar plexus part of self and the sacral part of self, we need that as fuel within us to even have, like, you know, again, what is desire needed for? What is it used for? How does it make you feel? Desire gives you a lot of the juicing up on the inside that it takes to move forth with some kind of action of pleasure. So to say that, oh, this is down here, therefore I need to leave that part of me alone, it takes you away from the jewels that actually reside within that part of you that wants to desire. And when you start to suppress desire, it can now become your enemy instead, because now it's being starved. It's being neglected, it's being abandoned, because there's this distorted perspective or perception that, again, I'll rather be up here than down here, when we are indeed all of this. It's just, again, really going through the points of self, just as this is why we're doing our walkthrough, so that we know what to release and we know what to keep in order to sustain clear travel within ourselves when we move up and down and in and around ourselves. So let me just, again, now pull up the next scale so that you can see the difference between the two. So let me just clear this away and pull up the second one. Okay, so here is the second scale here. Let me move this over for me and make sure it's coming up for you guys. Okay. So here's the second scale. Now you see the automatic difference between the first and the second. Now we have two parts of the scale that are split but still together. There's a center point. And when there's a center point to something, it evens out the sides. Now, when we're talking about the ups and the downs, we're not talking polarity here. Even though it looks like one side versus the next, this is not what this is, depending on the perspective. So you can look at this, and again, just like the other scale, and see one side versus the other. But what we're doing, just as we're doing with our Rise and Harmonize workshop, is we're putting them all together in balance so that we are not discriminating against ourselves, okay? So we want to make sure that our lower lands are happy and our upper lands are happy, so that we can move forward and create, right? That's like the point, and have some kind of awareness to that creation. So now, in looking at this scale, right, let's start from the bottom, right? Let's just start from the bottom here. So we have at the bottom, we have powerlessness. And again, pay attention to the chakra colors now. But the reason why I like just visually looking at this scale is because there's an expansion at the bottom and the top, which is more quote unquote realistic when we're talking about roots. Because when you see the roots of a tree are expansive. They expand and they grow bigger. So there's not a contraction at the root necessarily. And when we come to the crown, yes, of course, there's that expansion of light. So you have the expansion of light, and at the bottom or base of yourself, you have your etherical roots that are also expansive. So I like just seeing the expansive top and bottom just visually and looking at this. So now when we're looking at the bottom, powerlessness is at the absolute bottom. Then we have, it's also spiraling here as well, which is a different perspective than just going in a linear way. So we're moving to guilt, right? then insecurity, jealousy, hatred. Now, again, all of this is in the red, right? Rage, anger, worry, doubt, right? And now we're going into the solar plexus, impatience, irritation, frustration, pessimism, right? And then we come to a point in the center called boredom. Now, before we even get to the top, another reason why I like looking at this chart visually is because even some of the heart chakra, the lower heart, is still in the lower part of what we would consider the downward spiral. So when we look at the heart is not all innocent here, all right? And how we think the heart could be, because there are parts of the heart that are still in lower aspects of self that can still bring forth these lower levels of emotions within you, right? So then even when you get into the center, to the very center where there's nothing and everything, the 0 point of self, this is where you hit boredom, right? Boredom. I have no juice, like just nothing going on here. It's just boring. When you get past that point, now you're going more so into positive expectations, which is still living more so in the heart. Then you're going into contentment, belief, hopefulness, optimism, enthusiasm, happiness, passion, eagerness, love, right? As we're getting a little higher into the crown, freedom, empowerment, freedom, joy, right? Or joy and then freedom. And then there's beyond. So we went through this scale. Now let me just go through what some of the levels of insight that I grabbed from this particular scale here. And when we're talking about the invisible weight. So now let's just say you've ascended, just like in the first scale, the first set of ascension. You've ascended and you're like all up in here. You're like love, passion, like empowerment, happy, enthused, like hopeful and all of that. You're feeling yourself, right? When you are operating, and this should be a disclaimer for the ascension process, right? And I know there are some others out there who speak on this level of ascension in putting out this disclaimer as well, because it's important to really get this, right? So you get to the very top and you're enjoying that aspect of self. It's kind of new to you. You want to stay there. You want to live there, because now we're going to talk about resonance. So this is where you want to live. When you live here and you're here most of the time, which is usually, this is the goal for consciousness and awareness, right? When you live here most of the time, what happens is the more you generate yourself and your levels of consciousness here, love, joy, freedom, empowerment, guess what's going on down here? There's a simultaneous growth. We can see the expansion on both sides. Again, this is why I like this chart much better visually. There's an expansion on both sides, guys. So this doesn't mean that this contracts when you expand up here. So when you expand in your higher world and you're just up there, down here, there's an equal and opposite growth and level of intensity that goes on down here. So let's just say you've reached your highest joy and your highest level of freedom that you feel you can reach, that is humanly possible, that is God or goddess level, like I'm up here. Down here, you have your strongest demon that is just as strong as your joy, freedom self, okay? As what you would consider your supreme self. Or not, if you're not balanced, you're not supreme. So let's just get that right, because you can go all the way up here, but if you don't know what's going on down here, that's not a case of claiming your own inner supremacy. So that's not what that is. You can feel like you're supreme up here, but if you don't have this going on, if you don't have this and acknowledgement of this down here, then there's a dungeon, right? So you're up here and there's the freedom, joy, And then down here, the powerlessness, insecurity, and guilt. Let's just use those three. Those inner selves expand and gets as big as your higher. Okay, so the thing is, that's cool. That happens simultaneously, quantumly, energetically. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just how it works energetically. But here's the thing. As you are expanding up here, as you reach your higher level of consciousness, all of these are expanding down here. And the thing is, what happens when you're up here and trying to maintain up here is when you've come to a point of awareness within yourself where you're just kind of like, I'm good. I'm vibrating at this point of self most of the time, because it's where you are most dominant within your frequency that actually guides your path. It creates your reality, the resonance of your reality. So the goal for most people who are ready to truly ascend within themselves, whole, just whole, like as a whole person, that ascension, right? Not just upper, but whole. So when you get to that point of ascension, what you're doing is you are acknowledging that to maintain up here and to live here, that there has to be a maintenance down there as well, not a neglect and not an abandonment. So as you're up here, you're going to go in between these emotions, up and down, as you're living on this side of self. Now, the thing is, there's no separation. The only thing that separates the upper from the lower is awareness. If you can think about the bottom, underneath boredom, below the center, if you can think about below the center as your animalistic, instinctual self, that's down here, right? And if you can think of up here as your conscious self, your awareness, your present self, the point of self within your human that is absolutely aware and conscious of what's going on within, and the levels on which you are able to, again, project outwardly into your reality, creating your reality, that God level of self. That's what the upper, this is why they say that the gods live in the heavens, because the heavens of self is in the upper parts of self. That's the only place where if God means conscious and aware and awake, let's just say that that's what God means, then that would be the place where God lives. Now, what lives down here would be more so, again, that primal animalistic that doesn't necessarily, that's operating off of instinct, and that is very reactive. So even when you think about the animal kingdom, a lot of the animals are reacting to their environment. They're very in tuned. Let's not get it twisted. Let's not say a lot of the animals and the insects and all of the creatures, right, that we would consider non-human. Those aspects of ourselves are again, not necessarily creating their reality, but they are in it. So to be in the reality that is handed to them or given to them in certain natural circumstances, they are able to now react instinctually to their environment in order to survive. So animal thinking and being is more so survival. It's survival and instinctual. And it's very much needed, right? So that's, if you would think of what lives down here, it would be your animalistic self, your many animal selves just chilling, right? And let's just say they are happy there. They don't want to come into the world of the gods. They don't want to necessarily go up there. They have no awareness to even want to go there. And on top of that, the resonance it just doesn't work that way. So we have certain habitats for certain parts of self. So as you see it that way, this is when we're talking about the invisible weight or the invisible side of the scale. it wouldn't necessarily be invisible, because that's kind of like saying, I don't see you, I don't acknowledge you. But what I'm saying is it feels like it's invisible because you're living consciously in the upper lands of self. So it feels like the bottom side of self is more so you're not there, but you are. And this is where we're going to bring this all together. So you're going to move up and down. Now, I'll tell you what the interest is for these parts of you that are living down here, whether you want to call them shadows, whether you even want to call them demons. If we're going to call these gods up here, these are going to be the demons of self. And demons does not mean bad. This is not a good or bad thing. A demon perspective or a daemon's perspective is, again, instinctual and animalistic and reactive. And again, the godly part of self is more so projecting reality and creating and alchemizing and aware, and they are aware and awake of everything, right? So the thing is, just like up here needs to sustain and maintain a level of, it just needs to sustain itself, right? If we can think of these as being residences or dimensions, there's a self-sustainability here. Now, what happens is when you don't unlock the self-sustainability button, right, or door to down here, what happens is you're feeding up here, right? You're giving your mind food. You're giving your heart and expressions and visions, and you're giving all of your best inner fuel to the gods, right? And let's just say you're giving all your fuel to the gods, that down here, they're kind of starving down there. And remember, they're just as expansive. The demon of powerlessness is just as powerful as the demon of freedom. I mean, the god of freedom, right? The god or goddess of freedom is just as powerful as the demon of powerlessness. So when you're just, oh, the gods, freedom up here, and you don't pay attention to this one down here, and this one is starving because there are many gifts and tools and jewels that reside down there that do not operate in the essence of powerlessness if in balance. So you can travel down to the red self without picking up all of these demonic, or what they would consider to be lower vibrational emotions. And that's a different kind of travel. And we're going to get there just a little bit later in this conversation. But what I'm saying is, let's just use the two extreme polarities here when we're talking about the one with the other, or the upper and the lower. Freedom, God; powerlessness, demon. Now, the thing is, when you start dipping low on the upper side of self, and you have not dealt with down here, you start going down here, right? And when you start dipping low and you like positive expectations, you're in your heart chakra, and you dip down to below boredom, like you're bored. So if you're bored and you are not inspired by your own creativity and your own self-expression and your own wanting to be powerful, right? And all-knowing in yourself and exploring yourself in this way, what happens is you get bored. And when you get bored, guess what happens? It's easy for, it's like a resonance. It's like two magnets, right? So it's a resonance that pulls you down if you get too close to pessimism. So you could go from boredom to pessimism to now being frustrated with yourself. And once you've reached that lower part, right, this part that goes below the center without being balanced or being the explorative traveler on purpose, what happens is you go down into these lands of frustration. It's kind of like, if you can envision because this is only this is only in the instance that you've starved this area, right? It's kind of like having two lands that you were in charge of, and you're not feeding on one side of the land, you're like, they're hungry, and on the other side they're fat and fed, right? So when you go into this point of view, they kind of like bring you down. It's like coming down, and if you can envision like zombie like behavior, they're hungry. They see your feet dangling because you're coming down from pessimism to frustration, and now you're not home anymore, right? You're not home. Oh, they got you now. So then they pull you down. They get your feet and they pull you down. So what happens emotionally is that this is what creates a downward spiral. Okay, the frustration demon done caught you. Now the irritation and impatient demons, now they're getting a hold of you, and now you're being eaten, right? And then the worry demon comes in, and then the worry demon gets a hold of you, and guess where they're bringing you? They're bringing you all the way down to feed the all-powerful opposition of your God or goddess self. And when you go and when you allow yourself to get pulled down, if you're not paying attention to your emotions, when you allow yourself to go all the way down into these areas of yourself without being balanced, you get down into hatred, insecurities, and then you get into the guilt again. And then boom, that powerlessness demon has gotten you. And this is where you kind of like go in. It's kind of like when you're like weighing the scales of Ma'at, right? The heart and the feather. And when you're not balanced going into the afterlife, there's a God that devours the heart because it falls. And the alligator, I believe it's an alligator god in Kemet, where the god eats the heart because it fell. It's too heavy. So it can't even sustain itself to cross over into the afterlife. You don't necessarily want that if you're trying to live. Okay, so when you get down here and you're not balanced, you get to that powerlessness demon, what would kind of be kind of like your inner Satan, right? But the inverted aspect of that, because we're not demonizing these energies at all, because there's always another side to all of these essences that we're referring to. But for lack of better terms, just to bring in some kind of awareness here, it would kind of be like that, where, you know, there's a comparison to like the God of the Bible and Satan, right? So that would be the comparison between up here and down here. So once you've dipped down, and we've all dipped down, okay? We've all had our moments of dipping so low into the downward spiral that we kind of forgot about up here. And we forgot that we were gods and goddesses. And we forgot that we have the ability to become aware and awake within ourselves, and fully conscious and awake and balanced, so that we can harmonize, right? So when you come down here, you become so powerless that you don't even know how to climb anymore. Even when you try to get up, right? You're at the bottom of the pit, and you get up, insecurity smacks you right back down. Oh, damn it. Oh, man. And then you try to get up. Oh, here comes the guilt. You ain't going nowhere. Oh, man, maybe I can creep up just a little bit, get beyond my insecurities and my guilts. But now I'm kind of like at jealousy. Really? Back down. Powerlessness. Okay, I'm getting myself up. And this is the journey of true ascension within self. So you get up, you're like, oh, I'm so angry now that I can't get to where I need to go. So now you get rage and anger, and now boom, smacks you right back down, because it's like a magnet. So we get up, we're now kind of getting over the anger because we're tired of being angry. And now we're kind of worrying and we're doubtful, because now we've made it through the anger. We're no longer angry anymore, but now we're confused. You know, now it's like, oh, I don't know. I'm confused. I'm doubting. So boom, doubt. If you're right in the solar plexus, you're able to push yourself up. But then if the magnets are strong and your resonance is resonating with that part, pulls you right back down. So maybe you don't go all the way down to powerlessness, but you'll go to like maybe being angry again. And then you got to build yourself up again. And maybe now you're so irritated and impatient that you're just like, oh my God, I can't get out of this hole of self. So you're impatient and irritated and frustrated, but you're now, you're now much higher than you were before because you've gone through all of these demons of self and you're like, okay, woo, frustrated, but I got this. I can feel the air of self. I know I'm up there somewhere. I can get back home. So then you get up there and you're like, okay, right? And now that you're resonating up here in the green, right? And you're still frustrated, but you're high enough to now stay there. Even if it gets you back to boredom, you're like, at least I'm not jealous, insecure, feeling guilty and angry and doubtful, right? So at least I'm not there, but I'm at the center of myself. So now, how do I get myself out of this funk, out of boredom, out of this everything and nothingness of self without experiencing or moving? I feel it feels like no movement here. So I need some kind of like inspiration. I need to be inspired. Can I be inspired? What inspires me? Oh, you found your inspiration. Guess what just happens? Boo! You just made it back home into positive expectations. Wow. So you just made it across the border back into your higher lands, into your God lands or goddess lands of consciousness. So now you can get back up here. Now it's easier. It becomes lighter up here, right? It's lighter. It's just like, oh, it's a relief. The weight is off the shoulders. So now you're up here and you're working your way up. It feels familiar. You're like, oh, I've been here before. It's been so long since I've been home, but I'm here. I'm home, right? So now you're like content. You're like, oh, I'm just chilling right now. I'm going to enjoy myself in this like just normalcy, right? Because I'm not dealing with the worry and all the stuff that I was dealing with before. What a relief. And from that contentment, you start believing in yourself again. You start becoming more confident again, right? And then you become more hopeful and optimistic. And then you start bringing in your happy. You're like, because I'm happy, right? So you start getting there. And then you become more passionate. You're like, oh man, now I got some juices flowing on the inside. I feel creative. I want to express myself. I'm passionate. I want to start something. I want to empower people, right? And now you're operating in that self-love because now you're doing what you love. You're expressing what you love. And when you are in that space, you hit joy and now you are free. Now you're free. Now you're back to your free self. So what just happened though? When you get up to freedom of self, since you've made that journey with your awareness from the bottom to the top of self, you now can say, never again. Not with this level of consciousness. I will not allow myself to go into my lower lands without being balanced and aware. So now, while I'm up here at home, because home is where your consciousness is, right? Home is everywhere, but where you sense yourself, okay, consciously is where you are living. We can call that your present self, your higher self. So where your higher self is living, now you can strategize with yourself to now maintaining balance. Okay, how can I dip low to my sacral? Because we have sex, we have sexual feelings and desires, like when Tana brought up, we have some of those feelings from the ego. Sometimes the ego wants to like come out like raw, you know, like ego can be a little like shallow and cool, but like we still need ego because sometimes ego brings in that sauce of self. Ego brings in that je ne sais quoi, that like what, you know, the mask that you wear to the world, right? Which you need as well. So we can go into our solar plexus, we can go into our sacrals, and we can go there by carrying our consciousness with us so that when we dip low, we are still balanced and we're bringing these colors down here. We're blending now. It's like, wait a second, I'm still bringing my joy down to my sacral. So if that's purple and red, or that's purple and orange, honey, I'm getting my purple and orange on. You know why? Because I am joyful within my sacral. I am not in jealousy. I am not in rage. I am not in anger. I am not in insecurity in my sacral. So when you carry purple down into orange, you get purple and orange dancing with each other, right? And this is what we talk, this is what we call harmony. This is harmony, because this whole one color thing, like, oh, we're gonna be like orange, but are you bringing the higher aspect of self into your lower? So orange and purple would be that resonance for bringing that joy into your love making, right? Or again, bringing that passion, that blue. I see I'm wearing kind of like a teal kind of bluish color with purple lips, right? So there's a resonance here that's like passionate and loving and empowered right now, right? And right now, I can be in my solar plexus right now, just chilling, bringing down my blue, bringing down my passion and my purple down into my yellow. And now I'm like having a party in my solar plexus, goddamn it. I'm like, yes, I'm enjoying my ego in a healthy, balanced way. I'm enjoying my ego. So when you start doing that, it's like giving offering to your lower lands that need these energies as well, because they're not demons. They don't need to be demonized. You don't have to avoid going down in order to be good or in order to be like joyful within your life. If anything, it steals your joy if you are looking at these parts of yourself as only these emotions. These emotions can be transmuted and alchemized when you are bringing your consciousness and awareness to the lands, to the party, to the countries, to whatever you want to call them or consider them down here. All right, so that they're not zombified and that they're not starving, so much so that they come in and sabotage. And as soon as your feet start dangling at boredom, they pull you back down again. You don't want those demons inside of you. So in order to really be harmonized within yourself, and it's just like music, in order to really be harmonized within yourself, you go and party with your demons. But you bring food, and the food is self. Like it's a self-sustained system. You're like, yes, I got some beverages over here. I brought some joy juice over here. All right, solar plexus, you need some joy juice. Here you go. All right, who needs some love? Oh, does the root need some water? Does the root need some love? All right, in the order of powerlessness, we are going to empower our root. We're going to empower our sacral with some waters, okay, with some clean waters. So this is how you think of, if you're really talking about giving offering, if you're really talking about offering, why are we giving these offerings to external gods when these are the gods inside of you? These are the demons inside of you. And demons, again, and you know, this is the demon thing has been like misconstrued or misunderstood. It's just a part of yourself, again, that is instinctual and animalistic. But when an animal is taken care of, maintained, and has abundance to be self-sustained, it's not going to attack you. If you go into, like, you can literally go into the forest, right, or the jungle or somewhere, and let's just say there's like an animal, right, and a wild animal there. Usually, if that animal is full, that animal is just like, I'm good. Like, I see you walking by. As long as you're not disturbing my family, like my baby cubs or something like that, as long as you're not disturbing my area, I'm going to sit here and chill under this tree because I'm full and I've eaten because the lands here are abundant. Thank you. So therefore, you can make your way into the space, into the domain, without being attacked by yourself. And that's the difference. So when there's barren land in the land of all of these beasts, and they have nothing to eat, nothing to drink, it's horrible down there, horrific lands. Oh, hell yeah, they're going to be like, whoever crosses over, all right, right, let's get the higher consciousness to come down. Let's get some legs dangling so that we can just pull them down and eat. And that's the thing. You don't want to create the zombies inside of you. You don't want to create the hungry animal or the hungry beast inside of you. So that's why when we're talking about harmonizing, this is why it's important to not only ascend high, but to ascend to the center, to where you are spreading all of the consciousness. Instead of spreading dis-ease, you are actually spreading light to all parts of you. And you are allowing that light to just resonate on its own and change according to the environment to just balance it out. And this is what you can do from a little bit, maybe not completely in the center, but like from the higher heart chakra. I believe Ujo is going to do a workshop in October when we talk about the higher chakra. But the higher chakra point of positive expectations and unconditional love and all of that, you can use that energy to bring forth nourishment to the lower lands that are starving. So this is what I really wanted to talk about. And the reason why I said invisible weight, even though these essences are not invisible, right? But just to say, where you are is where you live, right? When you are here most of the time, and you come here some of the time, right? There are energies that live here already that are kind of like duplicates of you. They're duplicates of you. They're holding space so that there's balance. So this is why if there's a blue version of you or a purple version of you, there's an orange and red version of you too that is parallel, you know, and they're holding space. Let them do their jobs, okay? Even when we look, earlier this week, I connected with the goddess inside of me, the goddess Tara, which is, comes in many forms. I believe there's 21 versions of her. But for the most part, they're like the 7 main versions based upon chakras, right? And there are some Taras that are, there's like the black Tara who has like fangs, right? There's the red Tara who deals with like, so there are certain Taras within this goddess spectrum that deal with like lower level stuff, right? The black Tara with the fangs, she wants to protect. And she's going to protect. So don't let her become your enemy. You have to turn her around from inverted black Tara to right side up, facing forward black Tara, and say, Black Tara, don't attack me. I need you to go and face forward out here or in here to protect me instead. Okay? Okay, sister? You know what I'm saying? So this is how you're talking to your lower selves. Don't be afraid of them. So the black Tara, she's like, yeah, you know, I'm here to protect the temple. I'm protecting the temple because I respect the temple and I respect the goddess from above coming to me and speaking to me and acknowledging me. So therefore, you know what? I got you, girl. I'm not going to try to pull you down. I'm not going to sabotage you, even though I'm the all-powerful Tara down here. So guess what? We're working together now. So the higher white Tara goddess and the lower black Tara goddess is just like, they're cool. Like they're friends, they're sisters, they're allies to each other because again, they protect and guard and guide the higher and lower for the entire temple. And it's the same for the other. The Tara, the goddess Tara is just one example. Like you can go in any pantheon and resonate with any of these externalized ideas that just mirror what's going on the inside of us. So I just use the black and the white Tara because those are the two extremes. You know, white Tara is purity. She's just like pure nirvana. You know, she is untouched and untainted. Okay, ain't nobody getting up there unless she come down. Okay, that's like white Tara. And black Tara, she's just like, rah, you know? So when they work together, could you imagine the levels of protection and the levels of guidance and wisdom that you will simply just receive from those two aspects of self. And we're not even talking about these other colors here. The yellow Tara. The yellow Tara would be the prosperous one. She's the golden one. She's the one that you go to when you need some goddamn, hey, you know, I'm running a little low here. Is running a little low in the upper lands here. I think I need some help. I think I need to pull from my golden self. I think I need to pull from my yellow self and kind of like just go into that inner bank of self and go and commune with that part of me, of the yellow or the gold self, and just be like, hey, what's the offering you need? You need a little bit of love and joy juice. I got you, girl. Here's some purple. Can I get some of that yellow? Okay, I got some of that gold. Thank you. All right, so we're gonna go back upstairs. That's this is the only way I could really try to explain it in like reality in layman's terms, to really communicate with inner self this way, because you have to become friends with yourself. You have to really, or it's suggested, I say, you don't have to do anything, but to go into yourself this way. And when you do this, all of these emotions here are filtered out. There's an automatic filter with this. Doesn't mean that you're not going to go into anger. Doesn't mean that you're not going to be impatient. Doesn't mean that you're not going to be irritated, or you may go into feeling a little insecure from time to time. Doesn't mean that that's not going to happen, but the difference is you're not living there. You're not resonating on that frequency from a dominant point of view. You are dominantly where you want to be. You are visiting the other places. And on top of that, when you go and when you are drawn out of alignment, because it happens sometimes, it's just a compass just to show you that you are out of alignment. If you're feeling insecure today and you've been living in like love and joy, like for like the past couple of months, and you're just starting to feel a little doubtful and insecure, now you know where you are. So guess what? Your higher consciousness says, oh, come back. Like, let's filter that out. What do we need to do right now in the present time to do away with these feelings of insecurity and doubt? What do we need to do right now? So this is where higher and lower self work together to filter out these lower vibrational emotions that you don't want to carry into your dominant frequency. Because again, your reality and your timeline, right? Your experience, your world as creator of your world is only resonating on dominant frequency. This is why going and like nitpicking at these emotions every single time it's good to get to know yourself that way, but don't judge yourself, because if you dip into insecurity, you can hop right back out of it just as easy and just as quickly. And this is what we're going to get more into over the course of the remainder of the year, with really, there's an art to doing this. There's an art to dipping low, being unscathed and touched, and having fun in your lower lands, and really relaxing and bringing forth relief and joy in your upper lands, and really allowing that ebb and flow in between both sides of self, all coming from the third perspective, because we got to put that 3 in there. When we're talking about 2, we always got to put the 3 in. Because when we put the 3 in, that third perspective is the I am. It is the present self. It's the present self that is saying, I'm regulating. It's just a regulator of self. So that third point of view, here's something that I tapped into the other day. When you're studying something, when you're watching something, let's say you're watching like a video of somebody's, or you're reading something, an article, even a book, whatever it is, when you're in your study, right? Let's just say a video, right? When you're watching someone's video, they're doing some kind of lecture or something. Let's just say my video or whatever, whoever you're watching, you watch it one time. From the first eye or the first perspective you're watching it from, it's an automatic it's usually watched by the ego first. So you get all the surface meaning, you get all the tea, right? All the tea, because ego loves tea. Ego loves the tea, right? So you go and you get the tea, even if it's just surface level stuff, whatever it is. Maybe you're entertained. You didn't really get that deep into it, or maybe you did and maybe took something a little too seriously, because ego can do that too. Ego can jump to major conclusions because ego responds first. When you listen to something first, or when you do something first, ego is usually in the front, because ego, that's just ego. Ego is like, I don't wait online for nothing. You know, I come up into this club, you know, they know me up in here. I don't need no goddamn ticket. I don't need, my name is already on the goddamn list. I'm first in. Okay, so that's like ego. So then ego gets the message, right? And then when you go around the second time in watching something, reading something, experiencing something for the second time, now you're kind of like, there's more so the other side that is more so analyzing and correcting, overviewing. So now it's looking, so the second view or the second time around is more so it's a lot of distraction for the second go round of anything. Distraction is everywhere, right? So it's like, it's the other side of you that wants to now get into the minor details of things, to the point where you might completely lose out on whatever it is that you're looking for in this information in the first place, because you're so now over analyzing because you watched it or you read it or you did it the first time. So now you want to do it better. You want to understand it or understand it better, right? You want to do it better. You want to get that, whatever it is, you want to be better at it. So that's second round, that second perspective. I want to do better, which is fine. So you have ego, and then you have that other side that's more so analyzing ego, right? Now you watch that video or you read that book or you do that thing for the third time. Now you have, ego and analytical. Now in the third time, you're just like, oh, I'm cool. Like, I got both sides. And this side, I was very high strung because I was trying to correct some shit from the first time, you know, and the first time was just like all over the place, that it wasn't necessarily structured within your ability to really get what you needed to get, right? So from that third view, that third point of view, you're just like, I see both sides, and now I can come in evaluating in a way to where now I just know. You just know because you've experienced something, you've read something twice, you've experienced it twice, or you've watched it twice, to now you now know it intimately, to the point where it's just like, oh, I already know now. And through this knowing, I am able to now finally pick up on the quote unquote real deal, or the real message that was waiting for me in that article or the book that I was reading or the video that I was watching. I can finally get the real subconscious aspect consciously with the third self looking into it. So that's what that is, that whole three thing. So if we're going to look at this scale, I see two interacting with each other, but there's the third aspect of self that is observing all of this. And that is making sure that all of this is regulated. All of this is not judged. All of this is like even and harmonized. That's what your third self, or your third eye, or that third aspect of self, that's what it's there for. It's not there to really join in. But the thing is, when that third aspect of self is welcomed, it's felt. And what happens is it brings in that wisdom, and it brings in the energy that keeps you cool. It puts you in a space of being in flow. It puts you in a space of not being high anxiety, not being high strung, not being too rigid, not paying too much attention to the details, not taking too things too seriously, but taking things and being responsible, but at the same time having fun. That's what this third aspect of self does. It just brings in that energy to say, here, enjoy your life, learn, but most importantly, make sure you live. And that's what third aspect does. So again, when we're looking at this scale here, always recognize and acknowledge that third part so that you're straight. Like, you're just like, okay, and this is the process that we're going through together. You could go, it's never too many times. Yes, I've come into like my ascended self, but there's always more layers to uncover, always. So it's never just a one-time thing. So when you get the hang of navigating through these parts of yourself in this way, it becomes effortless. Now, it doesn't become easy. Effortless does not mean easy. Okay. But when something feels effortless, you ever do something and it's just like effortless, like, damn, I'm not even trying and I'm on it and I'm resonating and it feels good and I feel like I'm in alignment. That's what this energy feels like when you really come into that point of yourself on this journey. And it takes going through the first and the second and the third. Like, it takes you, in order to be a third part of self consciously, you have to have dealt with a perspective from the first eye and a perspective from the second eye in order to see from the third eye. You cannot, when people talk about their third eyes are open, if they have not completed anything significant within their journeys from two different perspectives, then they're not necessarily fully clear within their third eye vision, because third eye can only calibrate two even perspectives of an experience. And it can be something small, like I said, reading an article, down to like an experience in life. Like, it can be so expansive, or it can be like, again, very small. So it doesn't matter. But when you consciously know this, it's easier to open up this third eye. And we haven't even gotten to the third eye yet, like in the workshop series, but it's easier to flow and see and vision and create from there when you've at least developed resonance and ways of recognizing the two aspects of yourself that kind of go back and forth with taking turns with having experiences. So I know that was a mouthful. I know that was a lot. Is there anybody have any questions or anything? I'll leave the scale up just in case some of you guys are looking still looking at the scale. I'm going to go back on some of the comments. Monica said teamwork within. Yes. Love this. Literally how I chat with myself. Yes, Rachel, you got to be real with yourself. Even if you just got to be real. That's it. That's all is required, is just to be real. There's no scarcity over here. Desiree, if you turn that chart horizontally, you lose that aspect of high and low self to left and right. And I think it may be easier to travel that way. Desiree, yes, absolutely. That's why I'm calling it, when I see it as a scale, I do see it that way in my mind's eye, because it's less like pull. Because when you're dipping so low in that way of something that's going up and down, it's hard to get up, right? But when it's turned sideways, like the infinity sign, right? When it's turned sideways, so you have that 8 that looks like the hourglass, so we tip it this way, we tip it that way, and the sand comes down. So that's being pulled down by gravity, right? It's being pulled down. And the sand that is down doesn't really have a chance of getting back up there unless something is flipped. Now, when it's horizontal, there is a flow of in and out and through. It's literally like a bridge of self that you can keep and hold that way. And this is what balance is. Balance is actually turning that 8 or that particular shape into the infinity sign. That's what balance is. So when you live there, right, you're able to like have that effortless living and living with awareness, where there are literally no quote unquote demons that are out to get you in your own infinity. So it's just like, oh, this is my infinity. There is nothing and no one that can get me here because I'm balanced and I know all these parts of myself. All of my lands are good. They're all fed and they're like on my side. So we just out here living. And if there's any intrusive energies that are felt, or any like diplos that come in, like with insecurities and so on, we know how to deal with those energies. And we welcome, in a sense, for like experience if it's necessary, and trusting higher self and saying that maybe you need to feel insecure today so that you can like come back even stronger, then sure. But usually when you're balanced and you're working from that infinity part of you or point of view, it's very rare that you have to stay in a lesson very long. So if you're dealing with doubt and guilt and insecurity within yourself, but you're like in your infinity side, right? It may take like just a couple of days to regulate that. It won't take 2 or 3 years. You know what I'm saying? Just to get through some insecurities and some like getting over some guilts and shames and things like that of whatever it is that you're feeling guilty about. It doesn't take 2, 3, 4 years. It takes just, maybe a couple of days. And then you're regulated again and you're good. You got the quote unquote lesson or the reminder, and you just keep moving forward. So yes, Desiree, I like that you wrote that. It's playing music. It is like playing music. And the beautiful thing about music is that they're the same notes, but you can create infinite like music. All of the music can sound completely different using all of the same notes based on how you play. Just like I said, sometimes you want to bring that purple and that blue into the yellow, and maybe you want to go down into the orange. So now you're playing the notes of purple. I'm playing purple, blue, yellow, orange, and this is like do 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 do, like, and you just created a tune within yourself that you are enjoying. It's pleasurable. Like you like listening and feeling this resonance because you know how to play your instrument. So yes, absolutely. Yes, the crocodile god. Yep. Mm. Rachel said, interesting, because I feel like now my shadow self is my best friend. I trust her instinctual rooted intuition, foresight. She trusts me to lead through honesty or to check in and pull back to center when I pull into illusion. She really supports, reminds me of our unified mission. That is amazing, Rachel. Yes, when your shadow, or whatever you want to call these aspects of self, becomes your best friend, that is where it's probably the most beautiful harmonic relationship that you can have with yourself, because these parts of ourselves have so many jewels and gifts to offer the experience in life. So it's why close that or shut that part of self off just to live on the upper side, because you going to get, when you too much up there in freedom and nirvana, you get pushed back down eventually to boredom. That's what happens. So when you get back to center and you're like, God damn, like I've been all perfect this whole time and I'm kind of missing the lower lands, but I haven't really been very nice to them, or I've been like suppressing those parts of myself. So maybe they're kind of starving down there. So then you become afraid. And then as soon as you get to that borderline, which is boredom, you get down to boredom, oh, you damn right they're going to have themselves a meal with your consciousness. And you, good luck with climbing that ladder again. You know what I mean? In that way of having to do that because you didn't have the level of awareness to carry that balance with you and recognize and acknowledge these parts of you. Yes. Brown sugar, yes, I can post this in the group. It's actually posted in the group, but I can post it again. Yes, for sure. Yes, I will most definitely check my DM. Yes, Andrielle, yes, definitely do the workshop. I'll also post a link of the workshop directly. I'll do that today. For those of you who are looking to get started with the workshop, you can start on any day that resonates with you to begin. Actually, I recommend doing that. You know, what resonates with root? When you think of root, what day of the week resonates with that, and see if you're in alignment or out of alignment by doing that. So yes, and then you can kind of like switch it up. If you're like, my root kind of doesn't feel like Wednesday, maybe my root is such and such day, or so, you know, so maybe it's just a different kind of thing that you do just based on your levels of alignment. Yeah, so we are pretty much done here. I hope you guys enjoyed the workshop here. I'm going to offer assignment here as well. This is more so a discussion, but there are some action or some actionables that we have here that I'm going to post for you guys to just practice in your harmonizing. To practice in your harmonizing. So with that, I'm definitely going to make sure that you guys get to harmonizing with yourselves. And yes, I will see you guys very soon. And yeah, enjoy. Let me close this out.